Going?
Yeah.
All right, I guess we're already going. Well, welcome everyone to the Contact Exec podcast here today with Eshan Krane Tech, not Krane Technologies. Is that what it is, or is it just Krane Tech?
We just go by Krane.
Just by Krane, I get you. All right, but the website, like if we're going to go visit, it's
Right.
crane.tech, I think, right?
Krane.tech.
Yeah, and that's Krane for those of you listening and not watching out there. Well, Eshan, thanks for visiting with me today. Yeah, man, we've had a couple of conversations beyond the podcast, and I wanted to have you on just because you and I, we both come from that construction background first, and then I always get interested when guys come from construction and then they're jumping into technology because I feel like you've been there, you've been doing it, and you realize what the problems were, So give me just, for everybody out there, just give us a quick background on yourself and Krane.
All right, let's go fast. I'm third generation construction. My grandfather and my dad built a general contracting practice. So I grew up in like construction, going into a lot of like my favorite memory is going into concrete pours and like sort of looking at how many people are around like that pump and pouring concrete and my worst experience sometimes that I have nightmares on is like one of the concrete trucks going sort of backing up towards like the deck and then falling through it and one of the superintendents immediately got like a hard chest pain, like just sort of like, I mean, like I keep those memories within me. It's because it's so stressful, right? Like this industry is so stressful, and I some things that I think about when I implement technology to help them, not like make their life worse, right? But I started on the engineering side. I became a civil engineer, started working for a company called Stantec, doing a lot of structural design, learned like the engineering side of the business, and then went into the construction side. Worked for companies like Webco, Bold, then did some stints with like Chevron outside of the US, which is fun on large projects, and really got deep down. One of the biggest feedback that my dad used to give me is, hey, like make sure you sort of start with self-perform rather than going into general contracting, because with self-perform, you're gonna like learn how to build. You're gonna learn how to like manage people who are building and putting work in place, and sort of that helped me with my work when I started with Webco Concrete, because it was all about like let's hit these 3-day cycles, right? Like let's build, let's move fast. So that got me into the mindset of like production. How does all of these different things come together for us to go fast? Safety, material, supply, all of this. And then I carried that mindset into general contracting as well. There it was, okay, how do I now manage the trade partner? So, one of the biggest things I realized was, hey, like supply chain is something that everyone's sort of almost like ignoring, right? Like it's half of any of the cost on any of our projects, but materials just came onto the job site and was like sort of placed wherever. Of course, there were good builders who had a plan, but there are others who didn't have a plan. And I wanted to do something about it because I saw not only in production, but safety, it had a massive impact. And that's where Krane was born. Spent 2 years at Stanford incubating that. I was very lucky. I was one of those only construction guys that got into that program. So I was very thankful for that. And that just taught me how to go from a construction guy to understanding how to run a company, how to raise funds, how to build a team, and how to build a construction tech product.
I got you. So that brings you here. So, yeah, I think you're right. I think, procurement, getting materials onto the job, probably the most underserved markets, I think, but yet could be the most important market because, you can't build anything if you don't have the materials in front of you, right? You can't do anything unless you have the assets in place, the machinery in place, the equipment ready to go. You got to have all the pieces of the pie, right? You got to have the skilled labor, got to have the management in place, you got to have the plan. But then at the end of the day, you got to have the material. Plain and simple. And you and I were just talking earlier, like before we ever got on it, we were talking about, where do we place that material in the yard? is there even a plan for that? You know, some folks have a plan for that. Other folks are just like, we just kind of wing it. And I've seen some boneyards that were just like, I couldn't stand it. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm supposed to find what in this mess that you've now created. And the hardest part of it that I always felt is that once they've created it's even worse trying to untangle the mess, right? Once it's there, it's that thing is in motion, and there's no going back. So
And you and I bonded a little bit on this. I mean, how much of Greek work is that? How
yeah,
much of the 8 like lean wastes does that cover? Right? Like, anyways, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think that's it. It's like how much, because again, what's going to get damaged in that mess? You
Yeah.
know, what are you going to lose? What's going to be missing? Where is that going to hold something up? Inside the schedule. So yeah, underserved market, especially not just getting it there, but then organizing it or knowing where it is when it's there.
Honestly, that's where like my obsession started. And I have to thank teams like Webcore and Webcore Concrete who sort of gave me the opportunity to go and do something different. And I remember sort of going into a level of detail to understand the amount of form work that we have on the job. How much of that form work are we recycling from one level to the other? Do we have just the right amount that we need for that next deck? By the time like we strip the formwork from the previous deck, how much of that can we stage and recycle? What is that additional amount we need? I remember like on a high-rise job, we got to a point where we only had about a deck and a quarter worth of formwork, and we were running so efficiently, right? So absolutely, where it's staged, how like different trades interact with this material in the flow of work, and that was just brilliant. That opened my eyes around like the problem as well as like what could be a potential solution. And then the question was, why doesn't everyone do it,
Yeah,
right? Why aren't we making the effort to do it, right? So
I think it comes down to it is a monumental task. I think what happens is a lot of folks feel like they want to tackle it, but then they get into it and they realize they're in over their heads.
yeah,
Uh, Instead of, again, it's like the idea of like you don't you can't eat everything and you can't eat it in one bite,
right.
and you have to, incrementally, kind of step into these pieces. And I would imagine that's probably how you started Crane, was incremental. You found one thing and said, okay, let's look at this first, right? What was that one thing that you started looking at
Absolutely, it
first?
was delivery and logistics, right?
Okay.
It was like, how do we first know what's coming out of the job site? It was a whiteboard. And, our trade partners were supposed to go and like list like the items that are, coming out of the job site for that week. And nobody was doing that, or we
Yeah.
couldn't rely on that. And then, you know, we said, okay, what does a better solution look like? Something that's very simple, where everyone's sort of looking at the same data, which is like deliveries. And on a Monday morning, or, the foreman goes to a 6 a.m. huddle and sort of says, okay, look, here are my deliveries for the week. Looks like we have a concrete pour on Wednesday. It's blocking deliveries for 4 hours. So let's make sure either we bring a mobile crane or something if we have like specific critical deliveries, or no deliveries from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. Right. So
Right.
getting everybody on the same page and giving all the trade partners visibility of other deliveries happening onto the job site just sort of solved something. And this wasn't like AI, it was a very simple product, right? But
Yeah.
something that I learned through that experience is that I although it was very simple, you could also make that complex, because
Yes.
right, like you could still build a complicated calendar that you have to now do 10 things for even to get the information in. So very important lesson there I learned was like, even with the simplest looking feature, you have to like make it like 2 clicks, right? Otherwise nobody's using it.
Yeah, yeah. People get lost in the click shuffle, right? They're sitting there. Do I click here or do I click there? I can't remember what the click pattern was. You know,
Right.
Obviously, learning curve is a big deal. We were just talking about tech fatigue a little bit, and one of the things that I always heard was people say exactly what you just did. It's like, man, it takes me like 3 or 4 clicks to get here, and there was part of me that's like, yeah, well, listen, I used to have to go through 4 or 5 binders to find out the same kind of
That's
thing
true.
you're finding through this. So I
Right.
really, but I understand this is This is in the age of technology. I can't say well, we used to do it with pencil and paper. But that does bring me to my point, which is we got a little bit of tech fatigue going on because people are wanting to use everything in less clicks, right? And if you can't, then it just goes away. All right, they just it's like it doesn't really work the way I want it to work, and so then it gets set to the side. But what's weird is as soon as they get it set to the side, they want to go back to the old way that's so broken that it doesn't work at all.
Yeah.
And I think it's just that matter of time. So that onus has been put onto the technology providers to say, yeah, we got to solve our problems and make them super super simple. And that's not easy, folks. It's not easy to make a product super simple and be as intuitive as everybody would love it to be.
And I think that's a way. It's almost like a moat for companies like us that's sort of coming from the industry. That's sort
Yeah.
of like it's very difficult for someone outside to come and say, okay, yeah, we're gonna build the flashiest product, and I don't know why all of the software is like they call it non-sexy or whatever, but they don't understand like these teams have gone through 100 iterations to build something very simple that works for this team right now that is scaling. So I think it's almost like this hidden layer of intelligence that we have coming from the builder side, which is like brilliant, and I don't want to reveal that as much as possible now. But Robert, like I'll be also honest, right? Like I think LLMs have broken through, right? Like I think this is probably one of the most impactful technologies, even for construction, right? Like sorting through all of that data. And if you can get that data right in front of like the person who needs it just through a voice command or just through a search or something like that,
Yes.
now we've like solved something, right? So it's very interesting. It's an interesting time.
Yeah, I think the idea of LLMs and being able to utilize that is obviously the most efficient tool you can use, especially for sorting through the mass amount of data. Is like we have to be talking about these file folders that we used to have. I mean, these were 3-ring, 5-ring binders that were like this thick, and there was a bunch of them, and right, and so it's a lot of information to go through. Even a spreadsheet, like through the evolution of the spreadsheet then turns into what these file folders used to be, these big binders. And then that spreadsheet, then we found limitations within the spreadsheet, and now we're trying to get past the spreadsheet models. One thing that's interesting is you can find a lot of information about how folks work inside of their spreadsheet model, right?
Mm.
If they've made a spreadsheet, you can kind of really figure out what their workflow like needs to be.
Absolutely. There's, I think, different capabilities within that spreadsheet itself. You'll know power users versus okay, this guy's like a simple user,
Right.
absolutely can. And then
I,
exactly. And that's one of the tricks that we also use with our newer customers, right? So we talked about Crane like starting with delivery and logistics because that
yeah.
was the problem I saw on the field. And I'm like, look, like there has to be something better. Let's get everyone on the same page. If we sort of give everyone a better delivery and logistics tool, it should solve some of the pain points that we're seeing, and everybody should have it. And then we went upstream to the procurement log because the procurement log kicks off the process of like I call it the material flow, which starts with the submittal all the way to the delivery. So one of the ways we identified the sophistication of like the project team or like the GC was by looking at the procurement log. Hey, like how many columns do they have? Like how much
Yeah.
what's the level of detail? Are they using macros? Are they auto populating the activity ID? Are they
Yeah.
tied to a submittal log? Like you get to know how they want to use technology as well. So that was one of
Right.
the tips and tricks that we like looked at.
I love that too because you can also take the number of tabs they have. They don't just have like one big giant spreadsheet. They've got like
Right.
several different because then they're segmenting it out, right?
Mm.
They've got like each different trade. If they've got okay, this is trade material over here for just the plumbers, or this is just the mechanical, and this is just the electrical, and then this is just the right. So then they've got it all kind of mapped out and how they're sorting out between it. I always found that very very interesting how you could find out. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's sort of the next the that's how we evolved, right? Like
Yeah.
we evolved into those procurement logs and the biggest question for us was they said, "Hey, listen, like I would rather have my project engineering team spending time resolving things and
Mm.
being on the field, looking at execution, than being on a spreadsheet or putting together that procurement log and sort of calling all these subs and suppliers, updating lead times, updating required on-site dates. Now, don't get me wrong, you need to be in that data. You need to sort of say, okay, like what's late, what's falling outside of my required on-site date window, what submittals are getting delayed. But you as a project engineer or an APM, you're trying to resolve things. You're trying to get ahead. You're trying to be proactive, right?
Yeah.
But unfortunately, our teams got behind by just like putting the data together, by getting updates, by they were just overwhelmed. They were spending too much time. And that's sort of like how we went upstream from delivery and logistics to the procurement side, procurement logs at least,
Right.
by setting them up for the teams and giving them an actionable set of things to do to resolve,
I mean, well, I
right?
mean, it's one thing to set up a delivery, log and have your deliveries all scheduled out. But what happens if the material really wasn't ordered at all?
Right.
Or it hasn't really been approved, or it got changed in the submittal process, and you needed to know all of those different things. And again, like to your point, the idea of using an LLM or using AI to sort through all that information to give you the latest and greatest on this is the last time that this file was touched or this submittal was touched. It was 2 weeks ago it was touched, and we haven't seen anything from it since. And now it's coming up on date to either have been in that order window, right, or should be on its way or wherever it is in its process. And you know, a lot of that stuff over the years obviously has been getting missed, right? And there's a lot of great folks out there that have done a really, really good job. I mean, obviously they're super organized and they really
Absolutely.
know how to build things, and so they know what they need to have. But I always remember that one thing that I kind of always forgot was like that painted flashing. There was there's a there's some sort of colored flashing that needs to go on these windows, and it's like, well, who's responsible for it? Is it you're going to be your framer, your guy that's putting in the frame around it, and then the flashing goes, or is it the glazer? Are
Right.
they supposed to be responsible for that part of the hardware again? So things get lost in the shuffle.
Right. Right. And no, just you saying that reminded me of like, in lean practices, they have like sort of like you stop the fabrication line to sort of show issues in the fabrication line. So it's sort of like they've built a process where you're quickly getting into those issues and resolving that, right? Like
Yeah,
that's how the line is set up. But I feel like at least like in construction, like you're not getting ahead. Like you see the problem when that material arrives and it's too late. And then now the labor teams are moving
yeah.
it five.
Well, yeah, and then we don't have the historical information because we probably have it somewhere, but it never really got written down to where it could be aggregated to say, oh, hey, by the way, last time we did this, we missed these three things. These three things caused bottlenecks here, here, and here. Man, imagine being able to take a look at a set of prints or whatever, and then you've got your submittals and you got all your stuff getting ready, and all of a sudden it's automatically starting to highlight your bottleneck, your pain point areas just before as it's populating. Oh, hey, check this out, check this out, check this out.
And I think that's where the technology is going and very useful, right? Like now, as we've now deployed on billions of dollars of work, it's about like depending on the type of project, depending on like the equipment that's on like the procurement system, you would detect issues with maybe certain suppliers in maybe certain geographies, right? Ahead, even before the interaction starts, saying that, hey, heads up, right? Like
Right.
this may happen, so let's get ahead of it, right?
Mhm.
So, I mean, one of the obviously, like, this is a no brainer. Lead times is something that we're seeing across the across projects, mostly data
Mm.
centers, but like, hey, like
Yeah.
this is what's happening, right? Like,
Well, there's a lead times against data centers that are then going to cause lead times against hospitals and lead times against other projects. I mean, a transformer, a step down transformer for a hospital and things like that. I mean, they're needing the same type of things because of the same type of energy supply as these mega data centers. Who comes first? What's the lead time? Why? What's the impact? And it's regional, right? Really.
absolutely, absolutely, very localized and I think I started like a newsletter called Field Notes. And this is one of the things that I wrote. I said, hey, like everyone's staring at data centers, but have we forgotten hospitals? We're building a lot of hospitals, right? And they're facing the same supply chain issues as data centers,
That's
right? Like,
correct.
and if you look at the types of equipment, it's quite similar as well, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, and I think you asked, I mean, you said a brilliant thing, right? Like on the manufacturing and supplier side, how are they prioritizing, right? Like, I mean, I don't want to
Mm.
even go in.
I've heard some horror stories. I don't want to spread rumors. I don't want to spread any rumors, but I've heard some real horror stories, where
Right.
it's, well, I mean, it's well known fact that for
Yeah.
for the turbines now, for these, the behind the meter situation that's going on. These folks are having to kind of build their own power plants for these data center powers, because you can't connect to the grid. It's an 8-year wait to connect to the grid. Everybody
Right.
knows it. It's pretty much common information. So they've kind of scrapped that. And so it's like, okay, we're going to scrap that. What do we do next? Well, we're going to build our own. Okay, how do we do that? Well, we're going to have to get some turbines, and we're going to have to generate some steam, and we're going to have to figure this out. Well, man, it's $25 million, I think, or some crazy number, to just get yourself in line now,
Right.
with GE and Siemens and those groups, to just say, hey, by the way, for my power plant that I'm going to have to build, I'm just going to
Right.
give you 25 million so you can put a couple of these on hold.
Right.
Just get in line.
Yeah. I mean, and then that's like our biggest challenge is like if we are to really really go deeper and solve this problem, it's to bring in that transparency on the supplier side as well, right? Like
Yeah.
it's opening that up, right? Like talking to the suppliers, and then maybe not just the suppliers. And I mean, we work with distributors as well as manufacturers, opening the manufacturing capacity. What is your real capacity? How many lines are open? Like what is your order prioritization?
Yeah, yeah. So, and I like, okay, so, and I think that is, like, again, I think the technology that we're creating is definitely going to help expose some of the, I'll say, darker side of what's going on. A lot of people make good money knowing, where to go get their product, and how to get their product faster. They do.
Yeah.
That
I mean, it's a
relationship
relationship
business.
industry.
Yeah, it's a
So,
relationship industry.
right.
And yes, we do have, ways around certain things, and sometimes what they say is the lead time may not be the lead time, just depending on how that works. I'm not saying anybody's lying about it. I'm just saying most folks are trying to kind of just, they're trying to cover themselves, so they, because the last thing you want to tell somebody is, well, it's going to be 6 weeks, but
Right.
then it might be 8 weeks. So you got to give them that window. Well, best lead times we've got so far with our current capacity is 6 weeks. I mean, but in summertime we get busy. Sometimes it can be 9 weeks, right?
Right.
So
Yeah. I mean, I think where we've seen, like, especially going from, I mean, our system started on the material management at the project level, like tracking materials across the different trades, understanding submittal impacts, lead time impacts, deliveries. And then we've taken all of that data and now gone upstream to exactly these things that we're talking about, which is like, okay, who's delivered it actually? Based on the lead times they said that they were going to deliver it, right? Now that we have that data, you can sort of assess like quality of like the supply chain, right? And
yeah,
then and then can really understand, okay, look, like we can deliver this project in 36 months based on like real supply chain data, right?
yeah,
Rather than just pushing that to the right and like sort of lead times fluctuating.
yeah.
And then
Instead of relying on a subcontractor who says, yeah, we got it, don't worry, I got you. I've been in that situation before, where you're hoping that the sub is, they've done the buyout, whatever, they've said, yes, this is what we're going to do, don't worry, I've got you. And then I've gotten burned. I was like, you said it was going to be here. Well, my guy said it was going to be here. And then that kind of thing. Again, that's prevalent.
and I think this is a relationship business. This is a huge industry, but a small network of like people. We
Yeah.
all know each other.
Hmm.
If trust is broken, it's damaged. Simple as
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
right? So
It doesn't
I
last
don't.
long.
Yeah, it doesn't last long, and I think getting transparent data serves everyone well. whether you're an owner, whether you're a subcontractor, GC, or a supplier, right? So, and that's sort of maybe a little bit of a shift, Robert, into like, what we're trying to bring that earlier when we started in 2022, people weren't too comfortable, but now it's a must. It's because it's like requested. It's sort of in the contract. You will provide this information, right? Like,
Yeah.
and we've seen like that change in the industry happening, enabling good outcomes for companies like us as well. Because if it didn't happen, if nobody was asked or like mandated to give that data, then nobody would, right? Because
Well,
they
I
want
think, yeah, and I agree with you. I think people would make more money if
to.
they just became a little bit more transparent on, what is actually going on. Again, it's like if it takes 8 weeks, it takes 8 weeks. At least we can plan for that,
Absolutely.
right? Because what happens a lot of times, and retail, like retail bills they're shorter cycles, not like these mega projects, right? But I had a conversation with Dylan Ochner about this, and he's like, the faster that you can get that retail space open, the happier everybody is, because again, you're trying to get to the point where that asset, that project is an asset, and it's making money, right?
Absolutely.
It's turning
Absolutely.
over, and
Right.
the more transparent we can be about where we are and what's ordered, what's not ordered, that's
Right.
where the better off we're going to be.
Absolutely. And I think the time where we sort of, I don't know, made some money using the power of LDs is probably gone, right? Like
Right,
I don't think that exists anymore, to be honest, right? Like,
right.
and and the other thing, what's important to us is also to start this process all the way upstream with like people who are specing this equipment and designing these like buildings by giving them data, right? Like we go through this middle process of, okay, like here's the spec. It's not very specific. It's listed 10 suppliers. Let's go reach out to all of them, figure out lead times, figure out like, we go through this process when we could point all of that data upstream and say, hey, listen, this is what's available today. Can we design around this supply chain? Right.
Hmm.
And if we choose the supply chain A, you can maybe deliver the project at this cost in 18 months. But if you choose the supply chain B, you might still deliver it with the same cost, but your time might be 24 months. So which option would you want? I
Yeah.
think that's powerful, right? Like I think that's quite needed.
Again, again weighing options, and they talk about this. Sometimes it's okay if something is not going to get there as fast as possible, right? Sometimes it's better to say, well, that's good. Let's let that, whatever that is, that critical path item, it needs to
Right.
fit in this window, right? But other times it maybe needs to come faster, and we're trying to figure out who the supplier is that can make it come faster. Just depending on what the item is. So having the ability to analyze that data, again, we're kind of back to that AI conversation. In the past, we haven't had ability kind of to aggregate a bunch of that information and evaluate kind of on the spot, like in this kind of dashboard environment where it says option A says this, option B says this, option C says this, and here's the list of.
I keep going back to choosing by advantages, right? Like something I learned during my lean journey, right? Like I have these options. Let's sort of categorize that. What are my advantages? How would I like, I used to like run all these A3s trying to map all these like, I would do these CBAs and like, and I think that's another thing that I've been thinking. Like, I think, I think you and I offline had a chat about lead construction as well.
Yeah,
And,
yeah,
and,
big fan.
and why everybody should be sort of lean using these tools. And I think AI can sort of enable applying those principles rapidly now into
Yes,
all and every project. And we should educate and help teams do that,
yeah,
right? Like for us, the goal is supply chain and making that lean. I don't think like we can always be just in time. I don't think so, right? Because we have constraints. But like our goal is, okay, how do we, if supply chain is a constraint to your production, how do we manage that constraint really well so that your teams are efficient?
yeah,
Is something that I think about. And I mean, something you and I have like
yeah.
a foundation in, right?
Absolutely. Well, here's the way I look at it. We don't spend enough time on our construction projects in the planning phase. And some folks do, and they're very, very successful. I'm not saying everybody does it. I'm just saying there's quite a bit of the industry that doesn't spend enough time in the planning phase because they say there's not enough time. Well, now we've got tools that actually shorten the amount of time, that does that. So in maybe in that same window that you're already spending on pre-planning, you know what I mean? Let's not try to shorten the planning line. That's what I'm trying to say. Because quite honestly, this is the area where we're not spending enough time. You don't spend enough time in the planning phase to kind of find out where your bottlenecks are and find out where that goes.
I absolutely agree with you. I think fair. Not every team had the capacity or like the people around them to sort of dive deeper into the plan. But now it's different, right? Hey,
Correct.
Claude, run me 3 scenarios based on this schedule, right? Run through this like, RI, rapid improvement process and show me some, loopholes, right?
Yeah.
Or constraints. You can you can run multiple plans, figure out what works for you, and then deploy, right? Like,
You can. So Todd Zabel was on he's been on the podcast several times. He and I been chatted a lot, and he and I were talking about this, just this simple build. Like you can see in my background here, I've got some simple acoustic products, some stuff that I produce, right?
right.
In my little, MTCO carpentry business, I produce acoustic products. So of those things, like I could take a picture of that now and I can put it into Claude or I can put it into Jim, and I say, just give me a WBS, give me a work breakdown structure of this item. It
Right.
will, I mean, it will get very, very close, and it will, I was surprised at what
Right.
what it said. Now it wasn't perfect by any means, but man, it's only going to get better.
It's only going to get better. Absolutely.
Right.
And there's no excuse for not planning, because I think that
Right.
planning time has been cut down too,
Well,
right?
that's what I say. Because when
Yeah.
everybody starts talking about, we get the planning time, it takes too much, there's too many details. No, there's not. There actually is just the right amount of detail. And if you get to those details, you won't have to get back to them or rework them in the field and try
Right.
to reevaluate when you're already, pouring concrete or you're running copper or whatever you're trying to do. Look, man, this is the time you before you start putting stuff that's in place where you start, especially concrete, when you start putting concrete and framing in place, and then you're like, ooh, oopsie, I didn't
Yeah.
think about that. Yeah,
Right.
bad news. Now we got to cut concrete out. We got to remove framing. We got steel. We've got to adjust, and that just takes time. Because and it takes almost 3 times as much time because you not only got to tear it out, you got to remeasure, you got to refigure, you got to replan, then you
Right.
have to reinstall. Not to mention the manufacturing plants. I don't know. It was a that we were on. I think it was a. I'm dating myself, but we were building out when malls were a thing, and
Right.
it was like, but it was a kind of a remodel job on a mall, and somebody ordered steel, missed it, just they totally miffed the I beam that's where we were going to have to throw in. That is not, that's no fun, man. When you miss that, because first of all, we had done some measuring, got up, it was close, but
Right.
close was not good enough because we had gotten it up in the air.
Right.
I was like, this is not going to work, right? So we expended the amount of energy to try to figure out where we're going to put this new thing. Well, that's not going to work. Now we got to, lay it down. Do we cut it in place? What's the engineer think about us cutting it? It's just a mess. Right?
There's the cost of rework, man, is just. I think there's no excuse for like there should
Right.
be zero rework right now. Exactly where we're putting stuff in place, right? Like they should like. I mean, like I think this is where like technology's evolved so much to help our teams. Now it's the responsibility of the CTOs and the field innovation folks to put the right technology so that
Yeah.
your field teams and can move fast. Now that's a very I don't know how much you've gotten into this as well. Like I know we're talking about lean and like production, but like now there's a lot of like noise in the market too because everybody can develop something really fast,
Yeah.
right? But who's doing what? How specific is it? How tightly is it how tightly does it solve like this problem that you're trying to solve? All critical things, right?
Yeah. Right. Well, then you get into the argument of, are we just solving an edge case here,
Right.
where it's just one thing that we're doing this for? Is that really worth our time? Or is it something that we can, and my thought is this, if like, I look at it as if you can reuse this on every project, even if it is an edge case thing, but if you do enough of this, right, it's worth your time, you know what I mean, to work out those details ahead of time, utilizing the technology tools that you have, so that that way, again, it's just another thing off your plate. And once you've done it
Absolutely.
once, you know, well, then what's the ease of using it again, or teaching somebody how to use it again is,
I mean, I think you're bringing up like teaching is one of the massive use cases of Crane, which is like that we have customers who are coming to us, which has been very interesting for us to understand as well. Is hey, listen, like we have 10 new project engineers joining the company. You're building procurement logs at a
mm,
higher level of quality than like obviously all our entry level engineers. Can you train them and get them up to speed faster than the learning curve that they'll have to go through by being on a job and like ending that job? So like
mm,
now these AI systems are deployed for training these newer engineers as well. And now they're using like better systems there. This is how we also attract better talent and more excitement from like younger folks as well. I
yeah,
really think so, right? Like we have to. And then they're excited by that. And yeah, I mean it's good for the entire industry, I think.
yeah. Do you think? No, it is kind of a curveball question here a little bit, but you know, the pushback that you get from the AI conversation, are you getting a lot of that? Are you hearing a lot of that? Or are you hearing more of the positive? Because you know, I see stuff. Again, I think the market's got a lot of noise in it on both sides, right? There's a lot of noise on the side that everything's great AI, and then there's a lot of noise on the side is like everything's bad AI. What do you
First of
what?
all,
Yeah, what are you
yeah.
seeing?
First of all, we try not to talk about AI. We say we say, hey, like, do you have a problem with your material not showing up on the right time, or do you have issues with your team spending way too much time managing procurement logs? If you do, we have a solution for you. This is what the solution looks like. And we're using AI to automate some of the work. That's how AI comes in. When they
Okay.
ask, oh, how are you doing it? Oh,
Yeah.
that seems wonderful. Like, how did that happen? Right. Then we sort of open the doors and show them like the works of it. Like, the last thing I want to go and like when I go and pitch to a superintendent or a PM, I don't say, hey, like we're AI for
Yeah.
I don't know, delivery. Like nobody cares, right? Like
I get you.
AI is a tool, right? Like, can we solve the problem? Is that done very simply? Is where we're focused on. I think, yeah, I think I'm seeing, and so that's how we're sort of once you build the trust, it's super fast after that.
Right. Right. It's the
The
focus on the problem, not on the product. Yeah.
flashiness of like
Yeah.
yeah, I agree, I agree. But I think what I'm seeing in the market right now is I'll give you an example. We went to LCI 2025, 2024, and we our conversations were like this. Hey, like, normally folks who go to LCI like really care about planning a lot and
Right.
they're trying to better their practices. So they're like, okay, look, I want to get better with my supply chain. How can you guys help? No, there were no questions were on AI.
Yeah.
2025 last year when we went there, at least 75% of them came to us and said, "Hey, by the way, how are you using AI? Hey, like, do you guys use AI?"
I
And
know.
I was mind blown.
I know.
Like,
I saw the same thing.
yeah,
And
yeah,
going to Procore 2024, whatever, 2023, 24.
yeah,
Going to that and then going to last year's, like it's night and day the
I'm there.
conversation.
Yep, yep,
Night and
yep.
day the conversation of, we're trying to do this. Really? Okay. And then I kind of got the step in the middle. I was like Meek and Magna thing. It was like this joint combo thing at the beginning of the year. Then I started, the Procore guy was kind of giving me like the insider. He's like, oh yeah, we're working on a lot of this, you know, combine this AI thing. And then they roll it out at Groundbreak, and,
Right,
you know,
right.
they've got all this stuff. It's like, oh, okay. So the whole conversation is just totally shifted. It's like, it's almost like you put a badge of AI on your product and say, oh, here it is. And now with AI, it's like, you know,
I mean, like, I get it. You have to say that because I think what you're saying is like, look, like we have the capability to deploy AI, but I think I see two types of teams, and like we welcome both types of teams. One is a team that like is clear on the problem and they know that it's a very good use case to use AI, and they'll
Mhm.
come and say, "Hey, listen, we've we've mapped this out. I've talked to 10 superintendents. This is a problem. Give me your solution because this is a
Sure.
use case we're going to use AI." That's a brilliant customer,
Yeah.
right? Easy to deploy, easy to
Right.
test, easy to scale because they've
Right.
done a due diligence, right?
Yeah. Then you got the ones that are just fast and loose. Yeah.
Like I want to deploy AI, like I don't know where, right?
Yeah.
Like, but I want to go. I want to go
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
everyone around
Good.
me is using
Yeah.
AI,
It's
and
yeah.
that's a little chaotic because they haven't really identified a problem statement, and that's where like we sort of educate and say, hey, like, is this a problem for your organization? If that is the case, we can
Yeah.
help you here, but we can't be AI for everything because
Right.
that's where I think teams go wrong when like because there's excitement, right? Oh,
Yeah.
like I have a customer who's willing to pay, but I need to be AI for everything for them.
Again, I think a lot of them got burned in the legacy software days. You know, it's been 30 years of the same software, or 40 years with some of the same software. And then all of a sudden now it's like, wait a minute, everything's shifting. Like,
Right.
it's kind of like when we went from tapes to CDs, you know what I mean? And then it's like I have my tape deck and my player, and then now all of
Right.
a sudden I've got to buy all this stuff on CDs, and now my
Right.
CDs I don't have it anymore, and so now I have to get Spotify. You know what I mean? I think they're afraid they're going to be lost in the on them, all that. So
Right. I think for us, I mean,
hold on a second.
yeah, yeah, don't worry.
We're having a little technical difficulty here. Okay, we're back.
All right.
Anyway, so yeah, I think it's weird how you've gone. They people feel like that the industry moves so quickly. Like they bought a product, may have just bought a product, 2 3 years ago, and now it's already feels like it's out of date because it doesn't have an API, or it can't communicate with anything, or doesn't integrate very very well. They really just made a bad purchase, and now they're afraid they're going to get burned on this next one. Like, okay, wait a minute.
Right.
If this has AI, maybe it'll take me to the next 5 10 years or next 20. Will it? You know, and they'll say, well, the current versions won't, but AI is going to improve, and yeah, you're probably going to have to start utilizing some of that technology. But
Yeah, I mean, and that's why I think, I mean, I'm not. I'm honestly not a big believer of raising a ton of money through venture capital and building, Crane. But like, I think what we also realize is because of how quickly the capabilities are evolving, we have to stay ahead of it, right?
yes,
That means we need to have the engineering resources and the power to stay ahead and to also provide the trust to our customers that, hey, like, listen, like, we're going to be with you in the next 5 years, right?
yes,
Like, and,
yes,
and and I think I've heard too many times customers said, "Hey, like we worked with this startup or company, but then they ran out of money, and then like, okay, we're struggling." Or this company quickly went and sold to Proco, but we're an Autodesk company, we're in trouble, right? Like, well, I've heard so many of these things, and so like I don't know, as people on the other side building technology for construction, you have to consider all of that, right?
yes,
Which is a
yes.
ve which is why it's strategic, it's interesting, it's been fun. It's been fun.
Well, I'm glad, and I'm glad we had a chance to finally chat about this, and just introduce you to the contact exec audience, because quite honestly, they need to know about this. They need to know about these products. One of the things I always say is the reason that I do this is because I get to meet interesting people, and I get to find out about all the new products, and these products, they need to be known. So because people, and I've seen this, you guys showed it to me the other day. We did the demo. It looks fantastic. So yeah, it's just one of those things where people need to know about Crane Tech, and they need to know about Crane. They really do. And so thanks for coming on, being with me today.
Thank you, Robert. Thanks for having me.
All right, y'all. Well, until the next time, y'all stay safe out there. We'll be back next week.